Hello, and welcome to Science on the 7th, our virtual space where we talk about a variety of issues related to air quality and health. I'm your host, Pallavi Pant. As all of you are joining us from different parts of the world, we are into the month of October, where in many cases people are celebrating autumn, the changing in the color of leaves, etc. But also in many places, it is almost the start of the season where we start to see higher levels of air pollution. It's colder. We need to heat our homes. We need to stay warm. And as we go through October, November, December, the problem often is in the news and in the media limelight. Around the world, people use different types of fuels for generating and using energy, for staying warm, for cooking, a variety of those things. And a lot of these fuel uses eventually release particles and gases into the air, which we can then get exposed to, and that can harm our health. That also comes up quite a lot in the conversations around climate. And today we have a wonderful guest with us who thinks quite a lot about access to energy sources and justice in that, and energy poverty where people don't have access, and what that means in the larger social and socioeconomic context. I would like to welcome Dr. Anna Stojilovska from the Hundren Center for Social Sciences. She's joining us from Budapest, Hungary. Welcome, Anna. Really glad to have you here. We were
Thank you.
also welcome. We were also expecting another guest from India, but unfortunately, she's feeling a little bit under the weather. So we're hoping that she will feel better soon and we can bring her back on at another time. But Anna, really excited to talk to you today and learn more about what you've been researching on and what you found. And as I was just mentioning, the energy use is a big part of the conversation when it comes to air quality because it's a major contributor to pollution in the environment. It means we get exposed to it. And not surprisingly, even in the climate change conversations, energy transition is a big conversation. What energy sources do we want to use? At what timeline do we want to be able to use them? And in the climate conversations that are going to be happening in about a couple of months from now, in as part of the Conference of Parties meeting, this issue is going to be front and center. So, from your point of view, in Central and Eastern Europe, what are some of the biggest issues that people are thinking about and debating and trying to figure out solutions for when it comes to energy transition and when it comes to the energy situation?
Hello, Pallavi. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really glad to be here and to discuss a little bit about energy transition, energy poverty, use of fuels, and of course, in the global context with environmental and social consequences. Thank you for this question. So, first, when we talk about Central and Eastern Europe, we need to understand that this is a special region with a socialist past, meaning that was a time when energy was very affordable, below the market price. Well, buildings when were built in that period were not according to the energy efficiency standards of today. And of course, the energy production was very much fossil fuel based, and this infrastructure has been set in place. And this is what we call path dependency. It's very interesting. It's basically decisions made around the infrastructure of how energy is produced, or how also even buildings are set up, and how citizens use energy. And these are decisions made in the past that impact how actually we use energy today and how we also pollute as a result. And another thing that is important to say when we talk about Central and Eastern Europe, that compared to Western Europe, it has lower income and lower social protection, and so lower, so to say, affordability of citizens generally. And this, of course, limits their opportunity to so to say, join the energy transition or maybe switch to more cleaner and new alternative sources of energy like renewables. And also back then when after the change of the system, when this region was going through then energy liberalization, the prices went up and many households were unable to pay the bills. And we can see this potential, um, I would not want to say threat, but let's say to frame it as a challenge in the context of the low carbon transition. So we want to replace coal with renewables, and this is again another drastic change for the region. That because we need to replace the coal based infrastructure, and also we need to find solutions for livelihood of person who work in the coal sector. This means it's changing the even the current power structure of energy production in the region. And it's important to say that the energy transition, especially in Europe, does not mean only we replace one fuel with another, coal with renewables, but we also want to democratize the energy sector. That means that everybody should be able to join and profit from the process. And in this way, I want to mention some examples like prosumers. There's energy communities. So prosumers are those who, like citizens who, for example, have photovoltaic on their roof. They produce electricity from the photovoltaic from solar energy. They use it for their own purpose, and they can also sell the excess energy to the grid. So they're energy independent and also they're contributing to the transition. And energy communities is also a new concept. That means it is a group of a shareholder of citizens who jointly own an energy project. It can be a mean of producing electricity from renewables, even can be initiative to refurbish a building, but important is that they are also producing that the benefit, the profit that they are producing is being again reinvested into the community or in some social goals, like for example, reducing energy poverty, helping those that are in need. And because I've mentioned energy poverty, which is also my key topic, the it is a problem of citizens being able to pay their energy bills, and it is also the challenge of, for example, living in cold environments, in cold rooms. And because of this is more prominent in the region of Central and Eastern Europe, along with material deprivation, and also what has been established previously as the old pillars of power of fossil fuel, and all of this has shaped how the energy sector is in this country. So it's actually very more difficult. It's a bit of a more challenge to go through the energy transition, but it's also something that we need to still push for, being aware that we all have to go in the same direction. So that is buy the fossil fuels and, of course, affordable and clean energy for everyone.
That that is fascinating. I think in the last few years, as I've done some work in the region, I've learned a little bit about the challenges and the issues that are really prevalent. And it is very interesting because I feel like in different geographies we're sort of experiencing similar problems, but the social context is not always the same, the barriers may not necessarily be the same, but people are coming up with very interesting solutions and workarounds to address what is the challenge, in particular location. And I think one other concept related to what you were just talking about is this idea of a just transition or a just energy transition. There's a lot of media headlines these days about it, that there are these big partnerships at the global scale. I think we have a screen grab of some of them where people are increasingly trying to think about this idea that energy transitions shouldn't just be thought about in the context of technology or fuel from A to B, but also what it means for people. And that's sort of what you already started touching on with the prosumers. I love that phrase, by the way. So can you tell us a little bit more about what is the, what are we considering when we say just transition or just energy transition, and how is it seen and how is it being used in the Central and Eastern European context as well?
Thank you very much for raising this. I really love this how language also evolves as how policies evolve, and I think that we can see that EU is a good example of this. Just to begin with, because of course the region is embedded into right the EU policies, especially they're very strong in this energy and climate area. So first, I think many years, well, I would say many years ago, but 10 years ago, we mostly heard about the energy transition. So we were sure that we definitely want to uh, replace fossil fuels. We wanted to reduce our energy intensity. We want to use energy more efficiently. Of course, we want to use more renewables, and of course, we want to reduce our dependence from Russian oil. However, this and this has been going on. There was several set of policies. However, as I think the EU and member states have experienced that something was missing, or that, for example, what I said, prosumers or energy communities, if we think that, let's say someone wants to install a photovoltaic on their roof, they would have to buy this technology. They would have to probably um, be dealing with some permits to set it up, or even maybe some kind of energy controlling, depends on a country. They would also have to be able to have the maybe a change of some of the infrastructure in their own home, and all of this costs money. And of course, probably is mostly suitable for those living in houses which are probably not poor people, at least if I can very generally summarize. And so they realize that people who can afford most things, they can also afford renewable energy, or they can also have funds to change their boiler with the newest, more efficient boiler. So, and then they realize that, of course, we have to think about everybody. We cannot leave. I think the first idea was, let's not forget about the people working in the coal sector, right? There are also people who've had their education based on how the fossil fuel infrastructure works, and we have to think of, what happens with their jobs. Do they get reskilling? Can they go in the renewable energy sector? How easy? We have to think about also carbon tax adding to the price of electricity, that actually increases the price of electricity, and everybody pays electricity no matter your situation. You have to pay it, and it all kind of adds that, right, we want to achieve this goal of decarbonization, but this change, it has social, also environmental implications. And then what the EU was realizing that actually there can be increase of the gap between poor and rich. That means that people who can afford photovoltaic, they would easily put it on their roof, and people who would actually cannot, they are, for example, stuck with using fuel wood, which is the usually the most affordable but polluting fuel for heating and other energy services. And basically, we have a situation that we have to somehow take all these developments into consideration. So I love that the EU from just transition then added just transition or fair transition. Then it actually was more concrete, because then it realized with this just transition was maybe addressing mostly the coal sector, right? People who are employed, but then you realize on the demand side, we have, right, payers of electricity, or people who would maybe want to join an energy community or become a prosumer, but they need a support to do that. And that's why they've put with the European Green Deal, which is the a very famous document that kind of sets up or very completely this energy transition that has to be socially fair. That means that it's everybody. Nobody should be left behind. This is very very cool information. And then just to sum up that definitely we have to think about that this from this everybody of course there will be winners and losers every time when there is a transition, but there has to be equal or more equal distribution from the benefits of the transition among citizens.
Yeah, thank you for, also like taking us back in time in terms of how these conversations really started, and it really got me thinking. I feel like in so many conversations I tend to think about, okay, what's happening in India that, is similar or dissimilar from this. And I really appreciate what you were saying, both in terms of the people that are in that sector. So, like if we talk about coal, like people who may be working in the industry, but also the other social sort of structures around it. And in India, what has been very interesting and fascinating for many years now is that we have these parts of the country where we have coal mining, we have large like power plants, and it is not just the jobs that people are getting out of these investments. It's also infrastructure. There's schools that mining companies or like the big power production companies are running. They're running hospitals. They're running like local public transport. So it's really livelihoods, infrastructure, and then almost like how the entire ecosystem is supported. And as we think about these transitions, if we're moving away from these energy sources, we're thinking about the livelihoods and like jobs, but we're also thinking about what happens to all the other sort of existing support systems around it. And I think the other really interesting point you're raising is about, the issue of energy poverty and the issue of like having access to the right or cleaner forms of energy. And I know in the region, especially in winter, heating is a big component of, why people are using energy, and that access to cleaner sources of energy can be difficult. In fact, I mean, you would have to fact check me here, but I've heard anecdotally from people in the region that sometimes, of course, people are using, coal or they're using other types of biofuels, but in certain situations, you might also end up using like plastic waste or tires and other things. And I'm not surprised by that personally because I've seen the same thing happen in like South Asian context too. But can you paint a picture for us on what types of barriers really exist for people to access the cleaner sources of energy? And when we are thinking about energy poverty, which is a little bit different from access to clean energy, what are the things we're thinking about, and what are the contexts that we need to be mindful of?
Thank you so much for this question. I think it's a very universal question, right? Like, I think that there was a bit of a, I think a mindset that the global south is the one that's right, like, I mean, of course, it is affected more by access to energy. And then we're talking about, of course, especially about the global south, right? Using renewables to actually make sure that there is access to energy, kind of skipping that gas. Actually, in Europe, played a role to ensure this, but actually access to energy, or is also even of course you made a very good distinction between access to clean energy and access to energy. However, even access to energy as such is a problem in the region, and even not so much Central and Eastern Europe, even parts of Southern Europe, or more, I would say, more materially deprived regions of within Europe. So this is a very very global problem. And then, like, I would like maybe illustrate a situation um, yes, to give an example. Especially the energy crisis now, I think, has reinforced everything that has been going on. So usually, households who are in energy poverty due to high energy prices and limited resources, they are developing in order to deal with. that they don't have enough money for their basic energy needs, including basic costs, including definitely energy. They develop so-called coping strategy, what we call in academia, to deal with energy poverty. And this is very interesting from the point of view how much resourcefulness they show and what kind of innovative techniques they develop in order to survive, basically. So, was what you mentioned, garbage or plastic. It hasn't been, it's not unheard of, and
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, and it has been used as a tool to basically replace. So households who are the poorest, if I very bluntly generalize, usually tend to use more affordable sources like fuel wood, but sometimes they don't even have the means to buy fuel wood on time because it's usually bought. If you are well have it your finances well planned before the season, but sometimes because they cannot manage and it's it kind of a starting in the season and it's usually wet and not of good quality, and sometimes they don't have enough and they would run out of fuel wood during the
Yeah.
season, and they would have to like find other sources. So this is sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that it has been, of course, and this has like not just air pollution. It's air pollution bomb, but it's also indoor air pollution. Sometimes that is
Absolutely.
has very direct effects on
Mm-hmm.
health impacts on people, and it's really interesting that from my research with colleagues about parts of Central and Eastern Europe and even
Mm-hmm.
Southern Europe is that in these cases, for these houses, this is accepted risk. Like it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I would pollute
Yeah.
myself, but then it's a kind of a not as direct threat to life as not as
Mm,
living in a completely cold room. And
right.
there has been even cases that they actually in Portugal they put fire on in the middle of the room on the yes, in
Mm,
the middle of room just to get warm. So there are various things. But going back to the access to energy, there's also a lot of problems with disconnection. So thank you for raising that this access to energy because in some cases, and this is actually really related to how the energy system is set up, we have a lot of in case monopolies or private companies or oligarchy who actually would disconnect you after one unpaid bill, and sometimes there are no protection that you can get this that you cannot get disconnected during winter time, and people get disconnected and then you have to pay a reconnection fee and you kind of are left without electricity for in the winter, which is not a very pleasant situation, and by that you have like limited access to do other things like cooking, effects cooking,
mm,
and other services. So it is a very precarious situation, and also what I wanted to say that why also fuel wood is so important, or like households love it because it is, I would say, a magical tool, but it is can replace not just heating, but also can replace other services satisfied by more expensive fuels like
mm,
electricity for cooking or hot water. So they would actually
sure.
on the stove they would heat and cook
Mm-hmm.
and actually prepare hot water for showering. So this is
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
a goes to minimization of really satisfying your basic needs at home. And
Mm-hmm.
then also I also wanted to add bit more reflections, if I may, about a recent paper that we had with colleagues published about that is actually there sometimes can be a tension between efforts to alleviate energy poverty
Mm-hmm.
and efforts to address climate change. And
Uh-huh.
for example, because if you usually households who are in energy poverty, they underconsume energy, so you have to bring them up,
Mm,
which has climate change implications. On the
sure.
other hand, if you forbid fuel wood, you would put so many people at risk of further material deprivation, and then there is like problem that they would be put at health risk of avoiding expenditure, maybe on cooling. Also, this is the case in now
Mm-hmm.
with the climate change, and then or as I mentioned, energy prices increase, and actually this is everybody has to pay, and this also affects the livelihood of especially of vulnerable populations. So my point is that there needs to be a more policy integration and cohesion to
Mhm.
kind of take this into effect, and that access to energy is not something taken for granted, that oh, like we live in a global south, even in Europe this happens, and is something that really needs to be prioritized.
Yeah, I mean, you're raising so many very important and interesting points, and sort of what you're saying, especially in regards to integration, like better integration or at least thoughtfulness, and when we're introducing new policies, what the ripple effects might be on, something related but not necessarily the same topic is so crucial. And it's also interesting, as I'm thinking about it, because we've had for many years, we've had these conversations about we need to control air pollution. We've had separate conversations about the need to get people access to energy and get people access to clean forms of energy. And we've had conversations, of course, about reducing greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. And there have been efforts to try and integrate those conversations, but not as much as I think we all would like. And looking into the future a little bit, especially with the huge complexity that comes with this issue, do you see any recent developments that are leading us into the right direction, that are making you hopeful that we can continue to solve this problem over time?
Yes, that's a great question. I'm actually pessimist always by nature, but not a joke aside. It's actually if there's no problems, for researchers would be out of work. But I think what I've mentioned, or actually maybe let's make it a bit more clear,
Mhm.
is that I find the role of citizens in energy transition crucial. So it is, and by citizens, I mean, for example, the energy communities, which are also a group of citizens, and also I was just now fresh from finishing a paper about social movements, which is basically people protesting. For various energy issues, including energy poverty. And actually, there were cases in Poland, in North Macedonia, in Barcelona, very famous one, that actually citizens proposed a legislation or amendment to legislation in the parliaments, and to try to negotiate better laws that impacts the livelihood and energy access of citizens, and also the allies of citizens in the energy transition. I love the role of ombudspersons. Ombudsperson are these very traditional human rights watchdogs in a country, and especially they can play a role in the energy transition. This is my new one of my new favorite topics, is that because if you look what they do and how they observe the society and the energy systems and all the actors, they actually find that there's a lot of I could say um, a lot of actors that can cause energy poverty, like utilities, if they're monopolized or if they're actually privatized, that they sometimes do not respect the laws, or maybe like social protection is not strong enough. So basically, they really definitely push what the state can do in order to protect citizens. So I love these new governance models in the energy transition.
Yeah, no, I think we are in need of sort of broadening the networks and the ways that people are interacting. And I think we've talked so much about how this issue of like energy is important, and also from my point of view, energy is so critical and centerpiece in a lot of the air quality discussions. I just wanted to bring up one chart which gives an indication of how important energy really is in at least in this region. So if we can pull up the bar chart that we have, because in some countries there's almost like 30% or more of our PM 2.5, like the fine particles in the air, are really coming from energy production and residential use. That's a huge number, like 30-40% just from different forms in which energy is being used is pretty big. So I think I'm with you. We need we need broader like conversations, and we need broader sort of engagement by different types of entities who may not traditionally be necessarily thinking about energy access or about air quality or even about climate. Before we close, I did have one other question for you. You've spent several years now, thinking about these questions and topics, but what sparked that interest? Like, how did you get involved in this work? And what keeps you motivated in, continuing to do this?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question. So I think I'm a very curious person by nature and kind of a creative. So academic research is really comes very natural to me. It's very exciting for me. And I think like about 13 years ago, I started to work on energy policies. And because it's an area that is very interesting, it's like both socially, environmentally relevant, and also it's very closely related to livelihood and well-being of individuals. So sometimes when working on policies, we tend to forget the end user, right? Like the citizens and in all their diversity and how policies impact them. And on the contrary, I think that they should be really the focal point. And as a social scientist, I thrive on learning about what citizens think about policies and what kind of policy solutions can be created that benefit them well. And that's how I focused especially on energy poverty because it's very interesting. It's a very multidimensional topic it is about environmental impact, but it's also related about how the energy system works and how actually even how one country, how much democracy there is in one country.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, and I hope your creativity keeps flowing because you've done some amazing work, and I'm very hopeful that you'll continue to generate really good insights that can inform everyone's work in the region. Thank you so very much, Anna, for joining us today. It was fascinating talking to you, and just learning more about this issue. And I'm excited about the future. I think sometimes I share your I do share the pessimism, but I think the more we know and the better we can engage across disciplines, across sort of interest types, hopefully we can continue to make progress on this front. So thank you very much for all you do and for taking time to join us today. And everyone listening in, thank you very much too. We will be back on November 7th, so join us then. We'll continue conversations around climate, energy, and health and air quality. We'll dive a little bit deeper into decarbonization next time we meet. So until then, goodbye and take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you.